The dust told me before the alarm did. I've worked the Halstead Cooperative grain elevator for 19 years. And in that time, I've learned to read the air inside a place like it's a second language. There's a fine gold haze that hangs in the headhouse during a normal loadout. The kind that catches the light coming through the dirty windows and turns the whole room the color of a photograph left in the sun. That dust moves. It drifts and rolls with the draft from the aeration fans. It swirls when a truck dumps below. It settles slow and lazy when the leg shuts down for the night. You stop noticing it after the first few years, the way you stop noticing your own heartbeat. But you notice when it's wrong. That morning, the dust in Bin 7's headhouse was hanging dead still. No draft, no slow roll toward the intake screens, no hum from the aeration fans coming up through the concrete under my boots. Just a solid, motionless suspension of gold particles frozen in the gray light, like the whole room had been dipped in amber. And every instinct I'd built over 19 years told me that stillness meant something upstream had broken, and nobody had bothered to tell me yet. My name is Wendell Krause. I'm 51 years old. I run the mornings at this elevator outside a town most people couldn't find on a map if you spotted them the county. And I have spent my entire working life around machines that will kill you if you stop paying attention for 4 seconds. Augers that'll take your arm to the shoulder before you finish shouting. Bucket legs that'll pull you into the boot pit and grind you into the grain. Grain dryers that run hot enough to cook a man standing too close. You learn a certain kind of patience in a place like that, a slow, deliberate way of moving and looking. Because the ones who move fast are the ones who go home in pieces or don't go home at all. So when the aeration fans went silent at 6:02 in the morning, and the intercom crackled and popped and Delton's voice came through it thin and stretched, saying, "Wendell, get down to the scale house. Something's wrong with Ruby." I already had my hand wrapped around the cold steel of the stair rail. I didn't run. Running in an elevator gets you killed. And I've buried enough men who forgot that. But I moved. And I moved with the particular focused speed of a man who already knows in his gut that the day has turned bad, and hasn't yet learned how bad. Before I tell you the rest of it, and I'm going to tell you all of it, every ugly piece, because I've never once said most of this out loud, to another living soul, I want to take a breath and thank the folks who keep coming back to sit in the dark with these stories, and welcome you if this is your very first time here. If this kind of slow, grounded, true-feeling survival story is the sort of thing you're after, stay with the channel and leave a word down in the comments. It honestly does more than you'd think to keep this going. Now let me get back to that morning, because the second I stepped out of the headhouse onto the top landing, the cold spring air hit my face, and underneath the wind, I heard Ruby Ostrander screaming. And Ruby was not a woman who screamed. She was screaming from down in the truck pit, where the semis back in and dump their loads through the receiving grate into the receiving conveyor below. Her voice came climbing up the concrete face of the elevator the way sound climbs the inside of a well, distorted and doubled by the echo, so that it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. And under her voice, threaded through it, there was another sound I didn't have a name for yet. A wet, rhythmic, clicking sound, patient and hungry. The sound a mechanism makes when it's working exactly as designed toward a purpose you don't want to understand. I would come to know that sound better than I ever wanted to. I hear it still some nights, in the space between the furnace kicking on and the house going quiet again. I need you to see the place, because the place is the whole story. The Halstead elevator is a concrete giant standing alone on the flat. 14 silos, each one 120 feet of poured concrete, welded and grouted together into a single curtain wall of gray cylinders that you can see from 10 miles off across country, so level you can watch a dog run away from you for 3 days. On top of the silos sits the headhouse, the machine cathedral where the bucket leg dumps its river of grain into the distributor. At the base sits the scale house where the trucks weigh in and out, all glass and old linoleum and the smell of burnt coffee. There's the driveway with its receiving pit and its overhead grates. The dryer tower standing off to the east like a separate tower of a separate castle. And stitching all of it together, a maze of catwalks and man doors and inspection hatches, and running underground between the main house and the annex bins. A long, low belt gallery you could get lost in if you didn't know it in your sleep. It is a place built to move an ocean of wheat through it every harvest. And it is also, I learned that morning, a place almost perfectly designed to trap a human being with nowhere left to run but up. We had 6 people on shift that day. Me, Wendell Krause, foreman. Delton Pruss, the scale operator, 62 years old. Worked this elevator longer than I've been alive, practically. Hands like a pair of worn leather work gloves that had grown onto his wrists. Ruby Ostrander, 40, ran the dryer and the moisture testing and had the sharpest mind of anybody I ever worked beside. A woman who could look at a grain sample and tell you its history. Kaysen Wogemuth, 26, the new kid, 3 months in, still learning which levers meant which death. Marlis Feek, our office manager, the only one of us who could make the ancient co-op computer cough up a number without swearing at it. And Terrance Aldinger, 44, our maintenance man, the one who held the keys to every lock in the place, literally, on a ring the size of a donut clipped to a retractable reel on his belt, so it snapped back against his hip when he let it go. Terrance is the one you'll want to remember. Terrance is the reason I'm telling any of this at all. I came down the exterior stairs faster than I should have, one hand riding the rail, the metal treads ringing under my boots, and the wind pulling at my jacket. And by the time I reached the driveway, the screaming had stopped. And the stopping was worse than the screaming, because screaming means a person is still fighting whatever's happening to them. And silence means the fight's been decided. Ruby was standing at the edge of the receiving pit, with a long-handled grain scoop held out in front of her like a spear, both hands white-knuckled on the wooden shaft, her boots planted wide the way you plant them when you're expecting to be hit. Her coveralls were torn open at the left shoulder, the fabric hanging in a flap. Her chest was heaving. And down in the pit, half sunk in the loose spilled wheat, a man was moving. I knew him, or I'd known him. His name was Alvin Dietz, a grain hauler out of Newton, a man who'd been backing his rig into our driveway and dumping loads for going on a decade. A man I'd shared a thermos with more than once on cold mornings while the scale printed out its ticket. He was down on his hands and knees in the loose grain, and his skin had gone the color of skim milk, a bluish, dead white, with no blood behind it. And from the corners of his eyes and the corners of his mouth, there were dark tracks running down his face, thin and glistening, like his body had sprung a leak of something that wasn't blood, and wasn't tears, and wasn't anything a body is supposed to hold. He turned his head toward me, slow, the neck moving wrong. And I want to be honest with you about this, because it's the kind of honesty that costs something. For one full second, I thought he was choking. Dust choked. Haulers get dust choked sometimes, a lungful of grain dust that seizes them up. And I have thumped more than one man on the back and sent him coughing back to life. For 1 second, my whole body was already leaning down to climb into that pit and help him. Then Alvin Dietz opened his mouth, and the clicking sound came out of him, wet and deliberate. And I understood all at once, and all the way down, that whatever was down in that pit had been Alvin once and was not Alvin now. He came in on the 6 a.m. load. Ruby's voice was flat and fast, running level, the way very smart people talk when they're rationing panic out to themselves in careful spoonfuls so it doesn't flood them all at once. He weighed in fine. Delton'll tell you, he weighed in completely fine. And then he opened the truck door and just folded. Fell out of the cab onto the concrete. And when I went to check on him, he grabbed my... She stopped. Her eyes went down to her own shoulder, to the torn flap of coverall. And I watched the truth arrive behind her eyes, a half-second before it arrived behind mine. There was a mark on her shoulder. A crescent of small punctures welling up dark red through the pale skin. Ruby, I said. Just her name. I didn't have anything to put after it. Don't. She didn't look at me. She kept the scoop leveled at the pit. Don't say it in that voice, Wendell. It's a scratch. His fingernail caught me, that's all. It's a scratch. Delton came out of the scale house then, moving stiff-legged and careful, holding the door open with his shoulder like he didn't trust it to stay open on its own. Or maybe like he didn't trust his legs to carry him back inside if he let it close. He had the desk phone in his hand, the coiled cord stretched out taut behind him to its limit. "Line's dead," he said. His voice had a tremor way down under it that I'd never once heard in 19 years. "Cell's got no bars, not one. I punched 911 and got nothing. Not a ring, not a busy signal, not even that fast triple beep you get. Just dead air and then nothing." He looked down into the pit at the thing that had been Alvin Dietz, and his weathered old face did something I had never seen it do. It came apart. Just for a second, the whole architecture of it collapsed, and then, with an effort I could see, he gathered it back up and set it straight again. "That's not the flu they were talking about on the radio," he said. "Whatever that is, that's not any flu. They'd been talking about it on the radio for 3 days. A sickness that had started somewhere down in the meatpacking towns to the south, spreading north up the interstate corridors faster than the news could keep its numbers current. We'd half laughed about it the way farm country people laugh about trouble that belongs to cities and coasts. Kansas is a big flat nothing, we'd said, standing around the coffee pot in the scale house. Nothing gets here fast. It'll burn itself out down south before it ever finds us out here. It had found us at 6 o'clock that morning, riding in the cab of a wheat truck out of Newton. Down in the pit, Alvin got a splitting-fingered hand up onto the concrete lip. His fingertips had cracked open. He was strong, wrong strong, the terrible, tireless strength of a drowning man who stopped rationing anything. And he started to haul himself up out of the loose grain. And the grain fought him, sucking and shifting under his weight, the way loose grain does, dragging him back down. And that's when I did the first thing I'm not proud of. There are several. That one was first. There's a hydraulic safety grate on the receiving pit, a heavy steel grid that closes over the top of the opening to keep a man from stepping backward into it, and drowning in the flow grain entrapment kills a handful of people every harvest in this country. And the grate is the co-op's answer to it. The control is a single mushroom button on the wall by the scale house door, painted red, meant to be slammed with a palm in an emergency. My palm was on it before I'd finished deciding to move. The hydraulics groaned. The grate started down its rails, heavy and slow and unstoppable the way hydraulics are. And Alvin got a hand and half a forearm up through the closing gap before it seated. And the grate kept coming, because grates don't decide. Grates only close. And I will not describe to you the sound it made. I'll tell you only that afterward, the driveway was very quiet, and the thing on the far side of the grate was still moving. And not one of the 5 of us standing in that driveway could bring ourselves to look directly at it. Cassen was doubled over against the poured wall of the annex, being sick, one hand flat on the concrete to hold himself up. Marlis had come out of the office door and stood frozen 3 steps from it with her coffee mug still in her hand, steam rising off it into the cold morning air, forgotten. And Terrance was standing back by the tool crib in the shadow of the overhang, that big ring of keys gathered up in one fist so that they wouldn't jingle. And he wasn't looking at the pit at all. He wasn't looking at any of us. He was looking out at the road. The county road runs dead straight past the elevator, flat and gray, all the way out to the horizon in both directions, with nothing to interrupt it but fence posts and the occasional grain bin. And out on that road, maybe 2 miles off but closing, were 3 sets of headlights, moving too fast and too loose to belong to anybody bringing in a load of wheat. They wandered across the center line and back. One of them ran half onto the shoulder and yanked back on. They came like the drivers had forgotten the steering was theirs to do. "Trucks," Carson said, wiping his mouth with the back of his wrist, his voice climbing. That's good, right? That's people. That's help coming." Ruby and I looked at each other across the driveway. She'd already run the same arithmetic I was running. Nobody drives like that to bring you help. "Inside," I said, and I made my voice come out level and hard, Foreman's voice, the one that gets men moving when their legs have stopped listening to them. "Everybody inside, right now, and Terrance." I turned to him. And this is the moment I remember with a clarity I'd trade a great deal to be rid of. "Terrance, the gates. We have got to lock this place down, all of it. Every man door, both driveway roll-ups, every tunnel hatch, the annex, all of it. You've got the keys to the whole plant on your belt. Tell me you can seal us in." Terrance Aldinger looked at me. He had a long, careful, patient face. The face of a man who'd spent 20 years fixing other people's mistakes on machines that didn't forgive them. And pale gray eyes that always seemed to be doing a slow inventory of whatever room he stood in. He'd worked beside me for 6 years. I'd have told you, that morning, that I trusted him with my life. In a way, I did. That turned out to be the whole trouble. "I can seal it," he said. His voice was calm. Everybody else's had a shake in it, and his was as level as a poured floor. "Give me 20 minutes, and I can have this whole plant buttoned up tight as a drum, every opening in it." "You've got 10, I said. He nodded once and hitched the keyring back onto its reel so it snapped against his hip. And then he said a thing I didn't think twice about at the time. A thing that only came back to me later, in the dark, cold as a wet stone dropped down my collar. He said, "You worry about the people. I'll worry about the doors." I thought that meant he was being a good hand. I thought it meant he'd take his piece of the load so I could carry mine. I thought we were a crew. It meant something else entirely. But I didn't know that yet. That's the thing about the whole morning. Everything Terrance told me was true. And everything he told me was useful. And every single word of it was pointed at a target I couldn't see. We herded into the scale house first because it was the nearest 4 walls. And it was a mistake. And I knew it was a mistake, even while my own hands were pulling the door shut behind us. The scale house is glass on 3 sides. Big single-pane windows, floor to ceiling, so the operator can see every truck coming and going. And glass is a promise you can't keep in a situation like the one we'd just fallen into. But it had the desk phone, and the base station radio, and the master intercom that reached every speaker in the plant. And for those first few minutes, I told myself, standing in that fishbowl, that we needed information worse than we needed walls. I've made worse calls, but not many, and not that day. The 3 trucks came in off the county road and didn't slow for the entrance. The first one, a flatbed hauling nothing, clipped the co-op's entrance sign hard enough to fold the post over sideways and kept going, its engine screaming in a gear too low, and drove its nose straight up into the earthen berm we'd built around the propane tanks. and stopped there with the front wheels still turning and grain dust and dirt fountaining up around it. The doors opened. People got out. And they moved the way Alvin had moved that terrible loose-jointed hurry, all their joints a half beat out of time with each other, like puppets whose strings had been cut and then knotted back together by somebody who'd never seen a person walk. 4 of them off the flatbed. Then the second truck slewed to a stop in the driveway. Then the third came in behind it and simply stopped in the middle of the road with its doors hanging open. How many? Delton was at the window counting under his breath, his lips moving. That's 4, and I make it 11. 11 of the things, and more lights coming. They followed him. Ruby had pressed a wad of brown paper towel from the dispenser against her torn shoulder and was holding it there, and her face had gone the flat gray of unpainted concrete. But her eyes were still working, still sharp, still doing their job, even as the rest of her started to fail. Alvin, they followed him here, from wherever he picked this up, like he was calling them somehow. That's crazy, Kaysen said. His voice cracked in the middle of it. Is it? Ruby didn't look at him. She was watching the thing spread across the driveway, and there was something almost clinical in the way she watched. The same flat, careful attention she gave a grain sample, laid out under the inspection lamp. Look at them, though. They came straight in off the road to right about where Alvin fell. They didn't fan out. They didn't search. They came to the spot, and that arm through the grate. She didn't finish it. She didn't have to. We'd all seen the arm on the far side of the grate, still moving, still reaching. 20 minutes passed when any arm should. Whatever this is, they're not just dying of it. They're changing into something, and I think the changed ones can feel where the others are, like a needle finding north. I keyed the intercom mic on the desk. Terrance, give me a status. Static. A long, crawling hiss of it. Then his voice, breathing hard. The sound of a man moving fast between jobs. East side's done. Dryer tower's locked. Annex man doors are all locked. I'm working the driveway roll-ups, now get everybody back away from the scale house window. That glass is the softest point in the whole plant, and you know it. Working on it, I said. And that's the piece of it that still turns my stomach. Even now, he was right. He was giving me good, sound, professional advice. The exact advice I'd have given a green man in my place. Everything Terrance told me that morning was true and useful and correct, right up until the precise moment it wasn't. And it was the truth of everything before it that made the one lie work. We couldn't go out the driveway. The driveway was full of them now, more coming in off the road every minute, drifting across the gravel toward the scale house glass with that awful patience. So I took us up. There's an interior stairwell that runs the full height of the plant, from the tunnel level at the very bottom all the way to the headhouse at the top, sealed inside its own concrete shaft with heavy fire doors at each landing. It's the structural spine of the whole elevator, the one way through the building that isn't exposed to the outside. I got everybody moving into that stairwell shaft and pulled the ground-level fire door shut behind us and threw the latch. And for the first time since 6:02 that morning, in the sudden concrete quiet of that shaft, I let myself take a full breath. Bad idea. There was never a good time in this story to take a full breath. Every single time I did it, the world was waiting to take it back. Because as the fire door swung to and the latch clicked home, Marlis made a small strangled sound behind me, and I turned and there was Kaysen, frozen on the bottom step, with his palm pressed flat against the wire glass window of the door we'd just come through, staring back out into the tunnel-level corridor. And out there in the corridor, coming toward the stairwell down the mouth of the belt gallery on the annex side. The side Terrance had told me not 2 minutes before that he'd locked first was one of them. It had gotten in. On the side that was supposed to be sealed, one of those things had already gotten inside the building with us. Let me tell you about the belt gallery, because the geography of that tunnel is a piece of everything that came after. It's a long underground concrete tube, maybe 300 feet of it, that carries the transfer conveyor between the main house and the annex bins, so grain can be moved from one to the other without ever seeing daylight. It's low, I have to duck my head at the doorways, and it's tight, with the belt running down the center of it on its steel idler rollers. And there's just barely enough walkway on the one side for a single man to pass sideways in a pinch. It smells of rubber and old grain and machine grease, and the flat mineral cold of buried concrete. It is exactly, precisely, the last place on God's earth you'd want to meet something that means to kill you, because there's nowhere in it to go but straight forward or straight back. And the thing was, in the gallery, between us and the annex, coming forward toward the light of the stairwell. Up, I said, and I didn't have to say it twice. We went up that stairwell fast, past the tunnel-level landing, and I got the crew moving ahead of me and dogged the fire latch behind us hard, throwing my weight on the lever. Through the wire glass window in the door, I watched the infected reach the bottom of the stairs and put its ruined, splitting hands flat against the steel and start, methodically, to push. The latch held. The whole door shuddered in its frame, but the latch held. For now. Wendell. Delton had me by the upper arm, his old fingers digging in. How to get in? Terrance said the annex was locked. He said it first thing east side's done, annex man doors locked. I don't know, Delton. He said it. I heard him say it. I know he said it. I don't know. But something was turning over slow and cold in the back of my head, a heavy gear that had been sitting unmeshed and was beginning, tooth by tooth, to engage with the rest of the machinery. I keyed the wall-mounted intercom on the stairwell landing. Terrance, we've got one inside. It's in the belt gallery, annex side, the side you told me was locked. A pause on the line, longer than a pause should be, long enough that I heard my own pulse in it. Man doors are locked, Terrance said finally. I locked the man doors, all 4 of them. I told you that, and it's true. But the annex belt gallery's got that inspection hatch down at grade, remember? The one that never seated right after the frost heave last winter. I flagged it in the maintenance log 3 months ago, and nobody up at the co-op ever signed off on the parts order to fix it. That gap's been sitting there, open a finger's width since March, Wendell. That's on the co-op, and that's on whoever reads the log. That's not on me. And here it is again. He was right. That was true too. There was a grade-level inspection hatch on the annex belt gallery that never seated right. And it was written up in the maintenance log in Terrance's own careful hand. And I had read that log. And I had let the repair sit for 3 months because the co-op was slow on parts, and I had 100 other fires to fight. It was a completely true and completely reasonable explanation. And it landed on me with the full crushing weight of my own guilt, because I was the foreman, and I'd left a gap open, and now something had crawled in through the space I'd failed to close. That is exactly how he did it, all morning long. Every lie he told me was wrapped tight around a true thing, so that the moment I found the lie, I'd flinch away from it and blame myself for the truth instead. He knew me. 6 years he'd been studying how I think. We climbed. 6 flights. 7. The stairwell shaft echoing with the rasp of our breathing, and, far below us now, the steady, patient thudding of the infected working the tunnel-level door. And once, distant, the shriek of it testing a hinge. The higher we went, the colder the concrete got, and the more the light thinned out through the little wire glass windows. And Ruby was slowing down. By the fourth landing, I could hear a change in her breathing, a wet catch underneath it that hadn't been there at the bottom. By the sixth landing, she had to stop and put her back flat against the cold wall. And she stood there with her eyes closed and her chest working. "I'm all right," she said, before anybody asked her, which is how I knew she wasn't. "Just need a second. Just a second." She was not all right. Her lips had gone gray-blue at the edges. There was sweat standing on her forehead in beads in the cold of the shaft, which is wrong. A body doesn't sweat like that in the cold. Unless it's burning fuel, it shouldn't be burning. The paper towel wadded against her shoulder had soaked through dark and started to drip. I'd been around enough hurt men in 19 years to know the difference on sight between a person who's scared and running on adrenaline and a person whose body has quietly started to fight a war it's already losing. Ruby was the second kind, and she knew it before I did. She caught me looking. Ruby was always too smart for me to hide a single thing from. "How long?" she said. Quiet, just for the two of us, while the others sagged against the walls and got their wind back. "That thing in the pit, Alvin, from when he opened his truck door to when he was that. How long was it, Wendell?" "I don't know exactly." "Guess. You're good at guessing. Guess for me." I made myself do the arithmetic out loud. 20 minutes, maybe a little less. She nodded, slow, the way a person nods when you've only confirmed a number they'd already worked out for themselves and were hoping you'd contradict. She turned her wrist over and looked at her watch, an old scratched Timex with a cracked crystal. "Then I've got some time yet," she said. "Not a lot, but some. So we're going to spend it, all of it, and we're going to spend it right. Get me up to the headhouse, Wendell. There's something up there we're going to need. And I don't trust one of these boys to run it without killing somebody." Before I go on, and I have to, because Ruby's cracked old Timex became the clock that the entire rest of this thing ran on, let me ask you something. Because I have turned it over in my hands 10,000 times in the years since, and worn it smooth and never once come to peace with it. If you'd been on that stairwell landing with us, and you already understood in your gut exactly what that crescent of punctures on her shoulder meant, would you have said it out loud? Would you have made her face it? Or would you have done what I did, and let her keep her dignity by pretending right along with her that it was just a scratch? Tell me down in the comments. I have never once been sure I chose right, and I'd genuinely like to know what better people than me would have done. The headhouse at the top of the Halstead elevator is the strangest room I know, and I've spent a lot of hours alone in it. It sits 130 feet up in the air, and it's where the bucket leg, the vertical conveyor, an endless belt of steel scoops running up inside. A steel casing dumps its load of grain into the distributor. A big rotating iron spout, taller than a man, that swivels to point down whichever silo you select from the control panel. It's a deafening place when the leg is running, all iron groan and belt slap and the roar of grain. And it's an eerie place when it's not. All that machinery hulking and silent, the distributor squatting dead in the center of the floor like some huge iron animal asleep on its haunches. There are windows on all four walls, gray with dust and cobwebbed in the corners, and from up there on a clear day, you can see the whole county laid out flat as a map. That morning, I could see the 3 crashed trucks by the propane berm. I could see the driveway, and I could count the figures moving on the gravel far below, drifting and gathering like ants around a spilled thing 11, then more. More headlights turning in off the county road all the time. The elevator drawing them in from miles off, like Ruby said. a needle full of dead men finding north. And I could see something else from up there. From the headhouse windows, I could see the entire roof of the plant spread out below me. All the man doors and inspection hatches and the exterior catwalks. And I could see Terrance. He was on the roof of the annex, 3 silos over, moving along the catwalk with his keyring out and glinting in his hand. And I watched him stop at a roof hatch, kneel down over it, and do something to it with a key. And from that distance, 100 feet away, and 3 silos across, I could not tell whether he was locking it or unlocking it. And I told myself, of course he's locking it. That's the job. That's exactly what I sent him to do. But the cold gear in the back of my head turned one more heavy tooth, because Terrance Aldinger was not moving like a man in a hurry to save his crew. There was no urgency in his body. He was moving deliberately, methodically, unhurried, the way a man moves when he's working down a list. A careful, private, memorized list of his own. And every item on it was for him. "What's he doing up there?" Delton said at my shoulder. He'd come to the window too, and his old eyes had found the same small figure mine had. "His job," I said. And I didn't believe it even as it left my mouth, and I think Delton heard the disbelief in it. Because he didn't answer. Ruby had made her way to the far corner of the headhouse, to the gray steel cabinet bolted to the wall that housed the plant's emergency and safety systems, the aeration overrides, the dust collection interlocks, the man lift disconnect, all of it. She was a dryer operator. She knew the guts of the plant's electrical control better than any of us, better than me, maybe better than Terrance. She'd gotten the cabinet door open and was tracing the wiring with one gray finger, breathing careful and shallow. And Kassen hovered at her elbow with his hands half raised, wanting to help and having no idea how, looking like exactly what he was. A scared boy of 26, a long way from anyone who could save him. "Talk to me, Ruby," I said, crossing to her. "What are we doing up here? What's the plan?" "The plan," she said, without turning from the wiring, "is that we can't stay here and we can't go down. So we make it so they can't follow us. Give me the layout. Wendell, you know this plant in your sleep, better than the drawings do. How does a person get from the ground all the way up to here, every route, fast?" I gave it to her. Interior stairwell compromised. They were already in the bottom of it and working up. Exterior stairs exposed the whole way. And by now certainly crawling with them off the driveway, the man lift. A little one-man open cage on a cable that runs up the outside of the leg casing for inspections, slow as syrup. And worse, it could be called down and up from a button station at the bottom, by anyone or anything that leaned on the button. "The man lift," she said sharp. "Can we lock it out from up here, from this cabinet?" "There's a disconnect in there. Yeah. Kill the power to the whole man lift circuit. Do it. Now, while we're talking." I found the disconnect and threw it, and somewhere below a relay clunked and the man lift went dead on its cable. Now the interior stairwell. The fire doors between them and us. How many, and will they hold? 2 left. The tunnel level one they're already at, and the 6th landing. Both dogged shut. For how long? I made myself tell her the truth. Those latches aren't built to hold against something that wants through them bad enough. They're built to hold against fire and pressure, not against a thing that'll pull on a door for 6 straight hours without ever getting tired or discouraged. They'll work them loose, or they'll bend the door in the frame, or they'll wreck a hinge. Steel's steel, but a hinge is just a hinge, and a pin is just a pin. Hours, maybe, not days. Ruby was quiet for a moment, her finger resting on a wire, her eyes not on the wire at all. And then she said the thing that reached in and reorganized my entire understanding of the morning. The way you'd reach into an engine and move one part and suddenly the whole machine runs backward. "Wendell," she said, "the aeration fans went off at 6:02. You told me that yourself. Up on the stairs you said the fans were dead, no draft, when you came down. So think about it with me. Who turns off the aeration fans?" I stood there and stared at her. The aeration fans, the big low-speed blowers that push air up through the perforated floors of the silos to keep the stored grain cool and dry and breathing, run off the main motor control center, the MCC, down in the electrical room at the base of the elevator. They do not just stop. They run continuously through the storage season. They stop for exactly 2 reasons: a power failure, or a man walking into the electrical room and pulling the disconnect. And the power had not failed. The lights were on. The intercom worked. The man lift had power right up until I killed it 30 seconds ago. Somebody had walked into the electrical room that morning, before Alvin Dietz's truck had even finished rolling across the scale, and had deliberately shut down the aeration fans. The aeration fans that push breathable air through the sealed silos. The fans that, running, would make the inside of a closed grain bin survivable for people hiding in it. The fans that, switched off, would turn any bin we tried to shelter in into a sealed concrete oven of stale, dead, oxygen-starved, dust-thick air that would put us to sleep and then kill us without ever laying a finger on us. Somebody had shut them off at 6:02, before Alvin fell out of his cab, before a single one of us knew that anything at all was wrong. Somebody had known it was coming. "Terrance is the only one of us who's down by the MCC first thing," Delton said, slow. And I could hear him doing the same arithmetic I was doing, laying the numbers down one at a time and hating the sum. He signs the motor check log every morning at 5:45, 15 minutes before the fans went dead. Terrance Aldinger was standing 3 feet from the aeration disconnects with a clipboard in his hand. "That doesn't mean anything," Kaysen said, and his voice went up and cracked wide open on the last word. "A breaker something could have tripped, a fault could have—" "The lights are on, son," Delton said, and there was no cruelty in it, only a terrible gentleness. "The intercom's on, the radio's on. It's not a tripped breaker. It's not the power. Somebody's hand did that." I keyed the intercom, and I made my voice come out steadier than any part of me felt. "Terrance, why are the aeration fans off?" Silence on the line. Long. A crawling emptiness of it. And down below, 100 feet away and 3 silos across, I watched the small, distant figure of Terrance Aldinger stop walking on the annex catwalk. He went completely still. And then, slowly, deliberately, he straightened up and turned and looked back across the gap of open air, up and up at the headhouse windows right at me, though at that distance he could not possibly have seen my face behind the dusty glass. But he knew. He knew exactly where I was standing, and exactly what I was looking at, and exactly what I had just worked out. He'd been counting on me not to work it out for another hour yet, and he'd just felt the clock jump. The intercom clicked and his voice came through it, and it was calm and reasonable, and almost, I hate to say it, almost sad. "You weren't supposed to notice that for a good while yet," Terrance said. Nobody in the headhouse moved. The wind pushed at the windows. Far below, the dead men drifted on the gravel. "Terrance." I kept it level because level was the only tool I had left in my hand. "What did you do?" "I did the math, Wendell." Static crawled underneath his words, like something living. "Same math you're doing right this second, I'd bet. height, standing up there with your crew. 6 people. And this thing's already inside the fence. It was inside the fence before any of you even had your coffee. The phones are dead. The cells are dead. Nobody's coming. You've seen the road. You know nobody's coming. So I sat down last night with what I've been hearing on the scanner for 3 days. And I did the honest arithmetic on how many human beings this plant can actually keep alive through what's coming. And you want to know the answer? The answer is 1. 1 person in the right sealed spot with the doors locked from the inside and 1 small blower running air just for him and nobody else burning through it. 1 person can outlast this. 2's a stretch. 6 is a joke. 6 people in here together is just 6 different ways for everybody to die slow. You turned off the fans on purpose. I turned them off everywhere except the one place I'm going to be. Air's a resource, Wendell. It's just a resource. Same as fuel, same as water, same as anything else. And there's a fixed amount of it, and it's already running down. I'm not going to burn it, heating up 14 silos full of nobody. I'm putting it where it does one man some good. You locked us out of shelter before you'd even told us the danger was real. I locked the annex man doors like I said. That part's true, I did that. His voice never rose. That was the worst of it, how it never once rose. But I left that belt gallery hatch open on purpose. Left it open so there'd be one of them loose down there to give you all something to run from. That wasn't me. Something to send you up and away from the electrical room, so I could finish at the MCC without you looking over my shoulder. And I'm sorry about that, Wendell. I mean it. I've got nothing against a one of you. But I needed you moving up and away, and you moved right where I needed you, every step of it. Ruby had gone very still by the open control cabinet. Delton's jaw was working, the muscle in it standing out like a knot in old wood. Kaysen looked like a boy who'd just been told, plainly and finally, that no one was coming for him, ever. And Marlis, who'd said almost nothing in the last terrible hour, who'd stood through the whole of it with her cold coffee going colder in her hand, spoke up now. And her voice came out flat and hard as a struck anvil. "Where's the go bag, Terrance?" I didn't know what she meant. She saw on my face that I didn't. "The emergency crate," she said to me, and her eyes never left the intercom speaker while she said it. After the co-op safety audit last spring, we stocked a sealed shelter-in-place crate and put it in the first aid closet off the break room. I inventoried it myself. It's in my records. 8 liters of bottled water. 4 full-face respirators with fresh P100 cartridges, the good ones, the sealed ones, the kind that'll let a person breathe in a dust-choked dead-air silo when the fans are off. A trauma kit. And the handheld VHF, not the junk walkies. The real base station handheld. The one programmed to hit the county emergency net through the repeater up on the Sedgwick water tower. She turned her head and looked straight at me, and I saw she already knew the answer to the question she was about to ask, had known it for a minute now. 3 days ago, that crate had all of it. I would put my life on that closet being empty right now. The intercom stayed silent, which was the whole answer, laid out plain. "You took the radio," I said. "I took what I need," Terrance said. "The radio doesn't do 6 people any good anyhow. The repeater's probably down like everything else, but it might not be. And if it's not, if there's still somebody out there on the county net running rescue, then I'm going to be the man who gets to talk to them. Not because I'm better than you, Wendell. I'm not. I know exactly what I am. It's because I moved first, and first is the only thing that's worth anything now. And here is what all of that actually meant. And I need you to feel it settle on you, the way it's settled on the 4 of us, standing in that iron room, 130 feet up in the cold. The radio was gone, our one thin thread to the rest of the living world. The good respirators were gone, the only things that would have let us survive inside a fan-dead silo. The only shelter the plant had left to offer, made useless. The water was gone. And Ruby, the best of us, the sharpest mind among us, was leaning against a steel cabinet with a gray face and a wet rattle deepening in her chest, and maybe 20 minutes left of being Ruby. Terrance hadn't just stolen supplies off a shelf. He had, in one quiet, careful pre-dawn move, before a single one of us understood there was a war on, removed our ability to hide and our ability to call for help, both at once. And he'd done it so cleanly, so professionally, that we had spent the first hour of the end of the world thanking him for locking the doors that were sealing us in. "There's one more thing you'd better know," Terrance said, "since you'll work it out on your own in a minute anyway, and I'd rather you not waste the time. The perimeter isn't going to hold. Those driveway roll-up doors, the big overhead ones, their electric locks and their door operators are fed off the same MCC section as the aeration circuit. And in about..." A pause, and I could see the small distant figure of him turn his wrist to check his watch, mirror image of Ruby 100 feet up. "About 5 minutes from now, I'm going to walk into the dryer control room, and I'm going to shut down that entire MCC section. And I'm going to pull the section key and take it in there with me and lock the door. And once I've done that, nobody can bring it back, not you, not the co-op, not anybody without the key that's going to be in my pocket. And when that panel goes dark, those big roll-up doors lose their power locks. They won't hold. They'll drift open on their own weight. And every single thing that's out in that driveway right now, and there's a lot of them, and more every minute, is going to come inside, all at once, and it's going to flood the whole ground floor and the tunnels and the base of the stairwell. So, you've got about 5 minutes to be somewhere those things physically cannot climb before the entire bottom of this plant belongs to them. I'd spend it wisely if I were standing where you are. Goodbye, Wendell. For what it's worth, I always did respect you." The line clicked dead. Down below, the small figure of Terrance Aldinger turned unhurried on the annex catwalk and walked away toward the dryer tower. A man who had done his arithmetic in the quiet of the night and was entirely at peace with the total. 5 minutes. I looked at what I had left. Delton, 62, steady as a set fence post, but slowing. One hand drifting up to his chest now and then, in a way I didn't like. Kaysen, 26, brave enough underneath the fear, but green as spring wheat. Marlis, sharp and cold and furious and unarmed. And Ruby, dying by the minute in front of me, sitting down now on the floor of the headhouse, with her back against the control cabinet, and one hand still resting on its open door, like she'd been reaching inside for the answer at the exact moment the world took all the tools away. "Well," Ruby said, and she laughed, and the laugh folded over into a cough. And this time there was blood in the cough, dark spots of it on the gray concrete floor. "He's not wrong about the math, is he? That's the god-awful part of it." "Ruby, he's not wrong, Wendell." She dragged herself up straighter against the cabinet, spending strength she didn't have. "One person can outlast this in one sealed bin with one blower running. He did the arithmetic, and the arithmetic is sound. But he got the whole thing backward on which resource is the one that actually matters. He thinks it's the air. He thinks it's the water, the radio, the respirators. It's not any of that." Her eyes came up and found mine, and even gray and dimming, they were the sharpest, clearest thing left in that whole cold room. "Blah. The resource that matters at the end of everything is who's willing to spend themselves for the others. That's the only one there's never enough of. and Terrance just spent every last person but himself. Because a man like Terrance would never in his life spend himself for another soul, the thought wouldn't even come to him. So the only move we've got left is the exact one he can't imagine anybody making. Now get the others on their feet. I know how we live through the next 5 minutes, but you are not going to like my part in it. And I need you not to fight me on it, because I don't have the breath left to win an argument. Let me stop here one more time, because Ruby's watch had just become the clock the whole rest of this ran down. And I want to ask you something honest. When you found out that one man had quietly stripped the shelter bare and doomed the rest of you to save himself, and had done it before he'd even warned you the danger was real, had used your own trust in him as the lever, what would you have felt first? The fear or the fury? Because I'll tell you, standing in that headhouse, I could not for the life of me tell the two of them apart. They came up in me as the same thing. Let me know down in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and whether, in that moment, you'd have gone after Terrance Aldinger first or gone after survival first. Because that was the exact fork I was standing on, and I only got to choose one road. Ruby's plan was built on the geography of the plant, the same way everything at the Halstead elevator is built on its geography, because in a place like that, the building's bones decide what's possible and what isn't. And a person only gets to choose from what the concrete allows. Listen to me and don't argue, because I mean it about the breath. She had us kneel down around her on the cold floor, me, Delton, Kaysen, Marlis, the four of us in a tight circle, while far below us the fire door on the 6th landing began to boom and shudder under a weight that never once got tired. Terrance shuts that MCC section down in. She checked the cracked Timex. 4 minutes, near enough. When he does, the roll-ups drift open and the driveway floods in. Ground floor's gone. Tunnels are gone. The bottom of the stairwell's already lost, so we cannot go down. We were never able to go down. Not from the minute that hatch let the first one in. He was right about that too. He was right about damn near everything. And that's precisely what made him so dangerous, a liar you can catch. But Terrance mostly told the truth. So we're trapped up here, Kaysen said. His voice had gone thin and high. That's it? We just sit up here in the top and wait to run out of air like he said? No. Ruby's gray finger came up, steady by an act of pure will, and she pointed out the north window across the low tar and gravel roofscape of the plant, to a squat separate structure standing off by itself at the edge of the property. A low, windowless block of poured concrete beside a set of rusted rail tracks half swallowed by weeds. The transfer house. See it. The old rail loadout from back before trucks took the whole business over, back when this co-op still loaded grain into boxcars by gravity. And here's the thing about it that Terrance either forgot or never knew, because Terrance came up on the truck side and never once worked the rail end of this plant. The transfer house has got its own electrical service, its own little panel. It's not fed off the main MCC, it's fed off the co-op's other transformer, the one out at the rail spur for the boxcar loaders. Terrance can kill the main service from the dryer room and pull the section key and lock himself in, and it will not touch that transfer house panel, not one bit. And that panel runs a small aeration blower inside the transfer house. One little blower, one small sealed concrete room. That's enough clean air for 3 or 4 people to sit and breathe for a long, long time. And we get to it how? I said. Because I could feel her working towards something, and I could feel the shape of it. And I didn't want to hear the shape of it. Ruby, everything between here and there is open roof, exposed the whole way, and the ground's crawling. There's no path. There's one path. Her eyes held mine. The gravity spouting. And I understood, and my stomach dropped 130 feet straight down. The Halstead elevator has a system of enclosed loadout spouts, big steel tubes, angled downward, that carry grain by gravity from the headhouse distributor out and down to the various loadout points, so wheat can be run straight into a truck or a car below without spilling. Most of them are short, but there's one old one, disused for a decade, that runs the whole long way from the headhouse across to the transfer house on the rail side, from back in the boxcar days. It's a tube, smooth steel, 2 feet across, angled down at close to 40 degrees, 300 feet of it, and it hasn't carried a single kernel of grain since before Kaysen learned to drive. "You want us to slide down a grain spout?" Dalton said. He said it flat, the way an old man says a thing he already knows is going to happen and hates. "I want you to slide down a grain spout," Ruby said. "It's smooth steel, Dalton. It's clean. It's enclosed for the full length of it. Nothing down in that driveway can reach a hand into it or climb up it. You go in the top, right here at the base of the distributor, and you come out the bottom inside the transfer house. It is the one single path in this entire plant that never once touches a floor those things can stand on. It's a sealed slide from the top of the world down to the one room Terrance can't switch off." "And you," I said, because I'd already seen the whole shape of it now. And it was a terrible shape, and there was no unseeing it. "You're not planning to go down it." She looked at me, and there was no fear left anywhere in her face. None. Just that awful clarity burned clean by whatever was eating her from the inside. "The spout's got a slide gate up here at the top, where it takes off from the distributor. A guillotine gate, steel, meant to shut the spout off. And it's rusted, half-seized in its tracks, you know it is. Nobody cycled it in 10 years. Somebody has to stay up here at the distributor and crank that gate up by hand, and then hold it up while the 4 of you go through, one body at a time. Because if that gate lets go while a person's under it, it'll come down through the tube like a paper cutter, and it will cut whoever's there clean in half. And it wants to come down, Wendell. 10 years of gravity and rust, that gate has wanted nothing in this world but to fall. Somebody has to hold it up against everything it wants." She coughed, wiped her mouth, looked without flinching at the dark red she brought away on the back of her hand. "And that somebody has to be a person who is not going to be alive in 20 minutes, regardless of what they do. So do the math, Foreman. You're good at it, same as Terrance is good at it. But you're going to come out the far end of the same arithmetic, a different man than he did, because you're going to solve it for the others, and he solved it for himself. That's the only difference between the two of you that's ever going to matter." Nobody said anything. Below us, the 6th landing fire door gave way with a long, tearing shriek of steel pulling loose from its frame. And I heard the things pour onto the landing below, and heard them find the last flight of stairs. "I could crank it," Kaysen said. His voice shook the whole way through it, but he said it, and he looked Ruby in the eye while he said it. And I have never respected the kid more than in that 1 second. "I could hold the gate, and you go down, Ruby. You could still make it. You could still." "No, son." And Ruby's voice went soft, the softest I ever heard it in the years I worked beside her, soft as a hand laid on a fever. "I can't slide 300 feet down a steel tube with my body doing what it's doing right now. I'd lose my grip somewhere in the middle of it, and I'd jam up crossways in the spout, and I'd kill whoever came down behind me, and then I'd kill whoever came after them. And in 20 minutes, Kaysen, less, now I'm going to be one of those things down on the gravel. I can feel it coming up the back of my neck. I would rather spend the last 20 clear minutes I've got left in this life holding a gate up for 4 people who are going to walk out of here, than spend them hiding in a bin, waiting to turn into something that hunts the people I love. That's my arithmetic. And it's better arithmetic than his. and I worked it out my own self, and it's mine to spend. Now, get up off this floor, all of you. We're down under 3 minutes, and you are wasting them being kind to me. And kindness is the one thing I've got no more use for. I have made a great many decisions in 19 years running the mornings at that plant. Which bin to load? When to shut down a dryer that's running hot? When to send a man home mid-shift because he's tired or hungover or grieving and not fit to stand next to a running leg? I've made calls that saved fingers and calls I second-guess to this day. But I never in my life made a decision like the one I made in the next 30 seconds, which was simply to say yes. To let Ruby Ostrander die, holding a rusted gate up with the last of her strength so that the 4 of us could live. To not fight her on it because she was right, and fighting her would have burned the minutes she was giving us, and gotten every one of us killed. And because she would have hated me for wasting her gift, arguing about whether to take it. "Kasen first," I said. And somehow my voice came out level. Foreman's voice, and I still don't know how I found it. Then Marlis, then Delton. I go last. "You go before me," Delton said. "I go last. I'm the foreman. That's not up for—" "That is exactly why you go before me, you stubborn Dutch fence post." His old hand closed on my forearm, hard. "If that gate lets go, it lets go on the last one through. And I've got 12 years on you, Wendell. And I've got a heart the co-op doctor doesn't know about that's been skipping like a dropped stone for a year now. It ought to be me carrying the risk on the last slot, not you. You got a plant full of survivors to walk down that spout ahead of you and get settled and keep breathing. And you can't do a lick of that from cut in half under a gate. So don't you argue with a dying woman and a half-dead old man in the same 90 seconds. We flat do not have the time for it. And you know we don't." He was right. God help me, every single person in that room was right, all at once. And the being right of all of them was tearing me down the middle. We got the distributor spout gate open. It fought us for every inch of it. 10 years of rust and packed grain dust welded into the guillotine tracks. And it took Delton and me together, throwing our whole weight on the crank bar, hauling it around a quarter turn at a time, while Ruby knelt at the ratchet and rode the pole to keep the gate from slamming back down on us every time we paused for breath. And when it finally broke loose and screamed up into its pocket at the top of the tube, the opening it left behind was a black steel throat angling down and away into the dark. And a breath of cold, stale air came sighing up out of it. Air that smelled of old wheat and rust and a decade of undisturbed dark, the smell of a thing that had been forgotten. "Kasen," I said. "Feet first. Cross your arms tight over your chest. Keep your elbows in, or you'll break something on a seam. Keep your heels dug down against the steel to slow yourself. It's steep and it's fast, so ride your heels the whole way. It levels out at the bottom before it dumps into the transfer house. There'll be a pile of old spilled grain in there. 10 years worth. It'll be soft. You'll land soft. And when you're down, you wait for the rest of us. And you do not open a single door, you hear me? Not the outside door, not anything. You wait. Now go." The kid looked at Ruby. His mouth opened. "I know," Ruby said. "Go, Kasen. You live long enough to be an old man someday. And someday, you tell somebody about me. That's the only thanks I want out of this. Now go." He went. He climbed into the black mouth of the spout feet first, cross-armed, white-faced, and he let go. And we heard him rush away down the tube, a long, diminishing steel rumble, fading down into the dark. And then, faint and far below, a soft thud and a shout. He'd hit the grain pile. He was down. He was alive. Marlis went next. She stopped at the mouth of the spout and looked back at Ruby. And she said in that same flat, cold, anvil-struck voice, "I logged it all, Ruby. Every liter of water he took off that shelf, every respirator, the radio, all of it. And I logged what you're about to do up here. If any of us live through this, there's going to be a record. People are going to know exactly what Terrance Aldinger did and exactly what you did." And Ruby said, quiet, "Then it was worth being the one who kept the books all these years after all." And Marlis climbed in and let go and made it, and her shout came floating back up the tube that she was down. The tunnel-level door and then the 6th landing door were both behind them now. The things were coming up the last flight of the interior stairs while Delton was still fitting himself into the mouth of the spout. We heard the last stairwell door go, heard the sound of them spill onto the headhouse landing right outside the room, and heard them start on the final door. The only door left between us and them and Ruby was still on the crank, still holding that rusted guillotine gate up in its pocket with both arms, and the last of everything she had. And her arms were shaking now, a fine, hard tremor running the whole length of them. "Delton, go," I said. "Wendell." The old man had one leg down inside the black tube. He reached out and got my forearm again. That root-hard grip. That is not the last of Terrance Aldinger. He's sealed up in the dryer control room right now with the radio and the good air and the section key in his pocket. And he thinks he did the smart thing, the only sane thing. And he thinks it's over. But if you make it out the bottom of this, and you are going to make it out, I've decided it, so it's decided you are going to have to figure out what to do about that man. And I know you. I've watched you 19 years. You are going to want to do something about it. So I'm telling you now, while I've still got the standing left to tell you anything at all, don't you spend the rest of your life being his kind of arithmetic. Whatever you decide down there at the bottom, you decide it as Wendell Krause, not as him. You hear me, not as him. He squeezed once, hard enough to hurt, and let go. You were a good foreman, better than the co-op ever thought to pay you for. Now I'll see you at the bottom. And he pushed off and was gone. And a moment later, his voice came drifting faint and alive, back up the dark. And he was down. And then it was just me and Ruby, and the sound of dead men working the last door. Your turn, foreman. Her voice was nearly gone now, worn down to a whisper with an edge still on it. Her whole body was shaking, not just her arms. The gray had crept up her throat to her jaw. The clock on the cracked Timex had all but run out, and we both knew it clean through. And there was no more pretending left between the two of us, not a scrap. In you go. I'll hold it till you're clear. I give you my word. I'll hold it the whole way down. I climbed into the mouth of the spout. The cold breathed up around me. Below me lay 300 feet of dark I couldn't see the bottom of. Behind Ruby, through the wire glass of the last door, shapes were massing thick, and the steel was starting to bow inward in the middle where the weight of them leaned. "Ruby," I said, "I'm sorry I didn't say it back on the stairs. About your shoulder. I let you keep pretending because I was a coward, and pretending was easier for me." "You let me keep my head clear," she said, "so I could do the one useful thing I had left in me. That's not cowardice, Wendell Krause. That's about the kindest thing anybody's done for me in a good many years, and I'll go out grateful for it. Now go. Ride your heels, and when you come out the bottom of this thing, you take those 3 people, and you live, all of you, and you do not let him win the math. You promise me that, and I'll turn loose of this gate a happy woman. I promise. Then get gone, foreman." I pushed off. The slide down that spout was the longest 20 seconds of my whole life. In the dark, in the cold, the steel roaring and drumming under my back, the smell of a decade of dead grain filling my throat, my heels hammering against the tube to hold my speed, the seams of the spout thudding past under my shoulder blades, one after another after another. And somewhere far above and behind me, up the throat of the tube, I heard the last door give way at the top, and I heard Ruby Ostrander make a sound, not a scream, never a scream. Ruby was not a woman who screamed, but a low, fierce, steady, grinding sound of pure effort. The sound of a woman holding a 10-year rusted guillotine gate up in its pocket with everything left in her failing body, while the world came apart and around her back. And I heard her hold it, hold it, hold it, until I felt the steel level out beneath me and the darkness ahead of me went from black to gray. And I shot out the bottom of the spout onto the soft, yielding pile of 10-year-old spilled grain inside the transfer house. And Delton and Casson had me by the arms, hauling me up and clear. And then, from far above, 300 feet straight up the length of the spout, came a single enormous clang of steel meeting steel, the gate letting go, dropping the full height of its pocket, slamming home in its tracks. She'd held it up until the last of us was clear of the bottom. And then, with the last thing she had, she'd let it fall so that nothing on this earth could ever follow us down that tube. We sealed the transfer house. There's a heavy steel man door on the one wall, and I threw it shut and shot the deadbolt, and dragged an old loading table across it for good measure. And the four of us stood in the sudden dim quiet and listened to our own breathing. Kaysen found the little electrical panel on the far wall, the one fed off the rail yard transformer, the one Terrance Aldinger couldn't reach or kill from his sealed room. And I found the breaker labeled in faded grease pencil for the aeration blower and threw it. And somewhere over our heads, a small motor coughed and caught and settled into a steady, low hum. And cold, clean air began to move through that squat concrete box. And for the first time since 6:02 that morning, I stood and breathed air that wasn't thick with dust and dread, air that a living person could keep on living in. We were alive, four of us, in a low, windowless concrete room beside a rail spur that hadn't seen a train in 10 years. With one small blower's worth of moving air, and no phone and no radio, and not the first idea whether there was anyone left anywhere in the world still listening for the living. And through the one small dirty window, set high in the transfer house wall, across the weedy gravel of the rail yard, I could see the dryer tower where Terrance Aldinger had sealed himself in with our water and our respirators, and the one radio that might still reach the county net. His light was on. I could see it up there, a small, warm yellow rectangle high in the side of the dryer control room, steady and untroubled. He'd done his arithmetic in the quiet of the night, and now he was living inside the answer to it, warm and watered and breathing easy. And he thought the problem was solved. Marlis was the first to say the next thing out loud. She'd gotten her breath back, and she stood at that little high window with her arms crossed, looking at his light burning across the yard. And she said, "The repeater might be up." He said so himself it might be down, but it might not. And if it's up, and there's anybody at all still out there on the county emergency net running rescue, then that radio is how we get ourselves put on the list of the living. It's how anyone ever knows we're in here, and he's sitting on it, the only one there is, in a room he's locked from the inside, with a key in his pocket. "There's a way to him," Casson said. Quiet. And all three of us turned and looked at the kid, because it was the last voice I expected the next turn to come out of. but he'd worked the maintenance side alongside Terrance for 6 months when he first hired on, before Terrance got tired of teaching and I moved the boy over to grain handling. And Kassan knew things about the underside of that plant that I'd half forgotten in 19 years of only caring about what moved grain. The old steam tunnel, he said, from back when this place ran off a coal boiler before they went electric. It runs underground from the transfer house from right under our boots, right here over to the base of the dryer tower. Terrance showed it to me my first month on. He thought it was funny. He said, Kassan swallowed. He said it was the one way into the dryer control room that doesn't go through any door. He said if the co-op ever came out to fire him, they'd never find him, because he'd go down the steam tunnel and come up inside the tower and just vanish. He was laughing when he said it. The 4 of us stood in the humming dim of that concrete room and understood, all together in the same held breath, the same terrible thing. There was a way to reach Terrance, a way to reach the radio. A black, forgotten tunnel running under the gravel, out of sight of every dead thing drifting in the driveway, straight from under our feet to the base of the tower, where he'd sealed himself in absolutely certain that no living person could ever follow. He had stripped us of everything and walled himself away as sure as a man can be that he'd solved the whole equation for survival. But he'd left one variable out of it, the exact same one Ruby had said he'd get wrong every time, the one his kind of mind can't hold. Terrance Aldinger had never once, in 6 years of working beside us, been able to imagine that anyone would spend themselves to come after him. Not for revenge, but because 4 people breathing one small blower's worth of borrowed air needed that radio. More than one frightened man needed to be left alone with it. Delton lowered himself down onto the old grain pile with a grunt, one hand pressed flat to his chest. And he looked up at me with those steady old eyes gone soft now in the dim light. There it is, Wendell, he said. The thing I told you up in the spout, you'd have to decide. He's down at the end of that tunnel. And I'll tell you plain what he did, because we all 4 of us stood there and watched him do it. He took the last 20 clear minutes of a good woman's life, and he made them the price of his own comfort. Ruby died, holding a gate so we could get to this exact room. And the one thing that might get us out of this room and onto the list of people who lived is sitting in the hands of the man who put us in it. He drew a slow breath, and it caught halfway. So there's your arithmetic, Foreman. And I already gave you my one piece of advice on how to work it, back up in the dark. Whatever you decide it as you. He was right. Even then, even dying by inches with a heart he'd hidden from all of us skipping like a stone in his chest, Delton Pruss was right. The blower hummed. Terrance's light burned steady and warm across the yard. And somewhere under the gravel between us and him ran a black steam tunnel that only one of the 4 of us knew the way through. Waiting. So I'll leave you exactly where I stood that morning. 4 survivors in one small concrete room. One stolen radio behind one locked door. One man at the far end of a forgotten tunnel who had already shown us, plain as daylight, precisely what he would do to keep on living. And I'll ask you the question I have asked myself every single night in the years since. And I mean it as an honest question and not a story one, because I have never found the bottom of it. What do you do about Terrance Aldinger? Do you go down that black tunnel for the radio that might be the only thread left tying you to the living world, knowing full well what a man like that might do, the moment he hears you coming up on through the floor of his safe room? Do you leave him to the cold arithmetic he chose for himself, and take your own chances on a small blower and a long silence, and the hope that somebody, someday, comes looking? And if you do go down there, if you crawl the length of that tunnel and come up inside his tower and stand in front of the man who traded all of you away to save himself, what then? What does a man like that have coming to him from the people he spent? Where's the line between taking back what he stole and becoming his kind of arithmetic yourself? The thing Delton spent his last strength begging me not to become. I know what I decided. I'm not going to tell you tonight because I want to hear you first. I want to hear what better people than me would have done standing in that room. Because I have never once been sure there was a right answer down there, only a whole set of wrong ones. And the particular weight you pick up and carry for the rest of your life, depending on which wrong one you choose. Ruby held the gate until the last of us was clear, and then she let it fall so nothing could follow. Delton held his tongue about his failing heart until the moment the truth of it could buy me one more argument won. And I'm still down there some nights, in the dark of that humming concrete room, standing over the mouth of a black tunnel, listening to a blower run, deciding whether the man who stole our air has any right left to the one last thing the four of us still had it in us to give him, which was a choice. The same choice he never once gave a single one of us. Wherever you're listening from tonight, sit with that one a while before you sleep. I have. All these years, I still do. And I'll tell you the truth as plain as I know how to tell it. It doesn't get any easier with time, and some nights I'm not at all sure it ever should.